Hello again, YouTube. This is Lovell with an Explains Why video, and I'm gonna before I with an Explains Why in this case as to why the British have the best tank on the planet at the moment. And this one's actually a little different than usual because normally I deal with things that are a little more pressing in my opinion. This one's not so much because I honestly feels pretty I feel pretty good about the British having the best tank. It's like they're an ally. They've been an ally for well over 100 years. They've been an ally even before we entered World War One. And it's like at the very least they've been really chill with us for well over a century. So I'm really cool with this. So to start this off, and I think this is a little bit of historic poetry, if you will, is in 1916 the World War One was going on. There was people trying. There was a lot of static warfare going on. Trench warfare. Basically, you'd send endless waves of men over the top, right into machine gun and fire, and to trenches over to trenches that had guys with rifles that were just as accurate as your own, but they were firing them from fixed positions so they could be more accurate. And there was barbed wire in the way. There was massive of shell holes. Well, there was a lot of attempts on all sorts of sides to try and open things up. The Germans used chemical warfare, were the first to use chemical warfare, although the British and the French would later on use the same. There was also the use of um, the first strategic bombers, the Gotha bombers, and the Zeppelins by the Germans. There was also attempts for new fronts by British and French and Germans all together, which is where Lawrence of Arabia, and there was the Battle of Gallipoli that came out of there. And there was a lot of cases of where new friends were brought in. It's like Italy was initially just kind of neutral, but a little closer to Germany, but then a little bit of tension popped up, and Britain and France offered them some stuff, so Italy said, yeah, I'm going to switch. And we were among the new friends that was later on in the war, where we joined the war in 1917. But in 1916, the British were also looking at another new technology. They called it the Tank Project. They wanted German spies to think that it was a water carrier. Well, it ended up being what we now know as the armored beast known as a tank. And the first variant of it rolled into battle in 1916. It did move the needle a little bit. They were notoriously unreliable at the time and slow, and they didn't really know what they were doing as far as deploying them. We've learned a lot since then about how to use them. Now they did move the needle. They also had, and because the Germans saw them and were absolutely surprised, most of them had never even seen a car, much less anything like a tank. It's this big metal beast rolling at them, and it's shooting at them. So it's like a lot of them abandoned their positions because they didn't know what to do with that. So it was a rather unique experience, I'm sure, and actually one that was truly terrifying. And fast forward the tape to 100 years after the Battle of the Somme, the British have the Challenger 2, and they've had the Challenger 2 since the end of the Cold War. And the Challenger 2 is really quite the beast in itself. Our tank, our main battle tank, the Abrams, weighs 60 tons fully loaded. This thing weighs 80 tons. It's heavier, a lot heavier. And to put it in perspective, 40 tons is the weight of one fully loaded big rig. And that's if it's fully loaded, properly balanced, and everything, 40 tons. And Challenger 2, fully loaded, fully ready for battle, is basically at 80 tons, twice the weight of a big rig. That's a beast. It is still capable of moving equivalently fast as Abrams. Its comparably powerful engines make it so that way it may not. Abrams might be able to outrun it, but Challenger would still be able to keep up for most of that. Its fire control systems and guns are out of this world, and it's also got tougher armor. Its armor is actually made out of one of the top 10 toughest materials known to man. I forget the name of the armor, but it has made it so tough that one Challenger 2 took 29 RPG hits, and it was still not actually knocked out. It did take a bit of damage to the commander's periscope, that they did have to change that out, and that was the end of it. And that in itself was significant damage, and I'm going to explain why through the course of explaining the fire control systems. The way the fire control systems can work is the gunner could be engaging a target over here, but the commander could be spotting a target over here and actually put it into a fire control system where as soon as the gunner confirms the kill on the other one, on this other target, gun automatically switches. So the commander can constantly be spotting, and he can have several targets already lined up for the gun. So, and all the while, the fire control systems are actually computing what the gun actually needs based on weather conditions, based on the condition of the gun, as to how to already put it on target. Basically, if everything's working perfectly, the gun actually lines up right on target, and all the gunner needs to do is pull the trigger, and it's done. Thus, cutting down the amount of time between engaging one target and the next. In fact, versus its predecessor, the Challenger 1, the Challenger 2 was able to engage twice as many targets twice as fast. So, and that was all built with the idea of the end of the towards the end of the Cold War in mind. I mean, they had no idea that the Soviet Union was about to dissolve, but they built the tank with the idea of potentially having to face 1 million Russian tanks. So they actually made it so that way it could engage twice as many before it was actually engaged itself. And they also valued survivability quite heavily. So I'm okay with that. As I've mentioned, Britain has been one of our allies for over a century. In fact, our economy became the world's #1 economy, selling them weapons in the First World War. That was actually part of the justification for sinking Lusitania. The Germans believed that it was carrying munitions, which it was carrying 303 rounds as far as I'm aware, as far as its manifest. It was buried deep in the manifest. The Germans didn't know that at the time. But it was one of the incidents that actually pushed us into the war, because over 100 Americans died when that ship sank, and thousands of British civilians died when that ship sank. So, but they've been our allies for quite some time. They're a NATO country, so they're not only in the past been an ally, they are a current ally. So basically, if we're attacked, we can invoke Article 5 and get them involved, along with every other member of NATO, which there are something to the effect of about 20 countries that would be involved at that point. The idea being is that nobody would want to attack a NATO country because they'd provoke the others. It's like, no. You don't want to mess with that kind of that amount of firepower. You don't want to be on the receiving end of that kind of firepower. Even Russia's not that crazy. So, and between the gun having superior range to our tank and having a better fire control system, because Abrams can't do that. Abrams does not do that. He does an older-fashioned spotting system, where the commander will actually spot the target as the gunner is targeting it, the same target. Where the British commander, he can target targets all over the place, while the gunner is just busy picking them off as the commander lays it out in the computer. So bang, 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 bang going on, while the commander could be looking way over here. So, the only tank that the Russians have that could potentially provide a challenge is the T-14, which curiously, the Russians have not put that thing into battle yet. It's their newest tank. It's the first 21st century Russian-made tank. It was like pure from start to finish. It was made in Russia. And it's like, it's not a Soviet holdover. It's the first tank of theirs. It's not a Soviet holdover. And yet they still haven't put it into battle. It does have some unique features. As in, their turret is smaller simply because of the fact the entire thing is automated. The entire crew, gunner, the driver, commander, and loader are all inside the hull, a three-man crew. And the system has an autoloader. So the system has a rammer that actually puts the round in as the commander sees fit, or the gunner sees fit. I don't know how that lays out. And the armor is good enough that it actually has some of our leadership lying awake at night wondering whether or not we need to put a 150mm gun on our tanks where we've traditionally been using 120mm guns, which might actually get us to break out the Abrams A3. But I honestly, at the moment, considering the fact that the most advanced tank I've even heard of the Russians using in battle at this point in Ukraine is the T-80, which they have two other tanks that are more advanced than that, the T-90 and the T-14, and they haven't committed either of these two to Ukraine at all. So, with that being said, the British Challenger 2 has been moved to Estonia. And if they dare attack Estonia, Estonia is a NATO country. So Article 5 would be invoked, they're provoking that 20 countries I just mentioned. But the British Challenger 2 is already there. And not only there, but they're looking for Russian aggression. So the Challenger 2 would end up tearing any Russian tank apart. I honestly feel pretty confident that Estonia's okay with that, especially considering they have other backup in the form of air support in the form of our F-35s. American F-35s in the air. Yeah. This is part of the reason why I know that Russia is not going to be attacking any NATO countries. This looks like it's going to be Cold War 2.0, and we've been seeing the opening salvos of it. But we do need to upgrade our tanks. After all, Challenger was late Cold War technology. The German Leopard 2 is late Cold War technology. Even an Abrams is late Cold War technology. We've just been upgrading it a lot since then. We need to do a little better, after all. 1991 was 31 years ago. So, we might be able to do a little better these days. And we need to look into that. But for the moment, I'm actually okay with the British having the best tank on the planet at the moment. And I honestly find that it's historic poetry that the people who invented the tank had the best tank 100 years after they first let it off the rails. Okay, so I'm okay with that. That's actually pretty cool. I could also get into some other historic irony in other videos later. Depending on how much you guys like the history lessons that come with my videos, go ahead and give me some comments about that one, so that way I can know whether or not you guys want to hear more of things like historic irony, or you say you want to hear about dumb wars, because there's a whole there's a whole laundry list of them things. I mean, there's the war of the bucket, there was a war over bird poop, there was a war over football, or for those of us who are Americans, soccer. There was, yeah, there was a nice little bit, a whole tiddly bit of crazy, stupid wars, and so, or even just for some history lesson, because I honestly think some of these stories are downright cool. I was like, honestly, the man who volunteered to go to Auschwitz, there was two of them, actually. One Polish man, one British man. Both of them volunteered to go to Auschwitz. And went in as prisoners, of all things. Those guys are insane. Yeah, and it's like I look forward to telling some of those stories if you guys look forward to hearing them. But and I know I incorporate history lessons in a lot of my stories, and I mean, if it's like it goes back to a little something that's about me. I am fascinated by the past, present, and future. Past because where we've been, present to see where things are going, future to see where it will end up. And please, I will probably make a whole nother video as to why I'm not worried about the South Koreans versus the North Koreans. That's a good one. But yeah, like I said, go ahead and let me know if you want to hear more of these history stories, or if you want to hear more about how I'm not worried about the South Koreans. But this has been Lovell Halls. You guys have been great. And I still want to appreciate you guys for supporting me through where I've had a bit of a tough time, tough go of it recently. And I'll be talking to y'all later.